Thanks for the opportunity to speak briefly on this. So just 42 days, as Minister, to go. I think it is fair to say our citizens, they are deeply concerned still about the efficacy and the effectiveness of your government's preparations, especially for the no-deal outcome. At the Budget Committee yesterday, of course, we heard from the Minister for Finance that Budget 2020 will be formulated on the assumption of a no-deal Brexit of the UK at the end of October. That means, of course, the threats about Brexit and the imminence of Brexit, it is affecting directly our citizens' lives and what they will do, and if you think in terms of social protection budget, our taxation plans and so on and so forth. And he said, of course, 2020 budgetary strategy is to provide counter-cyclical support to the economy, including what Minister Donoghue called timely, and I quote, timely targeted temporary measures for the sectors most exposed. But in the no-deal circumstances, the Minister is forecasting, of course, a deficit in the order of 0.5 to 1.5% of GDP in 2020, with a hit to revenue of up to €6 billion. You know, these are kind of astonishing figures, Minister, however you actually look at them, and clearly are, will have a very traumatic impact on our economy and society. The Minister, of course, he did go over the actions that you have been taking so far. He mentioned, of course, contingency action plans, the enhanced capacity at our ports and airports, the further support for customs staff. He also mentioned, of course, the Budget 29 allocations, the £115 million in the number of the specific Brexit measures, including the £71 million for agriculture, the £14 million for the Department of Business, and, of course, £5 million for your own department. And the Taoiseach, of course, yesterday told me about his plans to enhance our diplomatic staff across the island of Britain, obviously in the run-in to October 31st and afterwards, because clearly, as we've seen with the avalanche of passports being taken up by British and Irish people in the two islands of Irish passports, our diplomatic staff and civil servants will be under tremendous pressure. Minister Donoghue, of course, he also referenced the future growth loan scheme yesterday and to support strategic capital investment. Now, while these measures and the revenues clear customs initiatives, they are very welcome, I think people and business, Minister, there's still grave and growing, I think, underlying concern about the negative impacts on so many sectors of our economy. And indeed, we are grateful, of course, to the briefings that yourself and the Taoiseach have provided us with. But I think with 42 days to go, there's still a nagging feeling that we may not be ready. So, I mean, I'd echo the comments that other deputies, that Deputy Pringle and others have said, that we do need the fullest possible picture. And my colleague, of course, he referred to the EORI, the numbers, and I know that in a recent briefing we heard that the vast bulk of businesses had obtained such a number now. But, I mean, when will we have 100% compliance in that area? The extension of time limits for the haulage and aviation sectors 2020 regarding the number of licences for companies dealing with the third countries, that's also, of course, welcome. And I'm aware of the additional spending at Dublin Port, the £30 million, and the preparations at Rosslare Harbour. And, of course, the Taoiseach's response, I think, to Deputy Chambers of Fianna Fáil regarding the land bridge and facilities at Calais for our trucks coming and going are also, that's also very valuable to hear that. But it is disappointing. I think it was disappointing to learn yesterday from Minister Donoghue that most of the necessary funding to protect our economy against a no-deal Brexit, it will have to come from the Irish Exchequer. I mean, I think Commissioner Hogan has already said that he, indicating that whatever funding is available, that many of the affected sectors will not be funded, by the European Union Irish Brexit Fund. And perhaps that's something you could comment on. What is the kind of support in financial terms that we should be expecting? I mean, we are net contributors, as you know, Cathaoirleach, is it 5 or 6 years now to the European Union. We've been a staunch pillar of the Union in terms of supporting the euro and supporting financial measures. So while their support for the backstop, I think, has been welcome and valuable, we will need, I think, very significant financial support, given the kind of projections that we have, like a £6 billion hit to revenue, for example, is the kind of a gap that to try to fill it would impose significant austerity on a country that's trying to emerge from austerity. So I think that's something that we will be expecting a strong response from Europe on. And of course, we've also had indications of a grace period for Ireland, and it was welcome, I think, that was it yesterday or today we hear reports now that whatever plans that Prime Minister Boris Johnson seems to be trying to cook up in his what's the word, very excitable brain, that it may include a transition period that will go to 2022 in any new withdrawal agreement, and that obviously would be welcome. But we certainly will need a very significant grace period and full financial support from the European Union and from Brussels in the first year or so of the post-Brexit relationship. Obviously, a Brexit withdrawal deal which totally avoids the restoration of any type of hard border, it must continue to be the absolute minimum settlement which Ireland and our 26 European partners could and should accept. And I know, as far as the Financial Times reports, Prime Minister Johnson and his government, they now only at long last seem to be proposing a common zone for agriculture and foodstuffs, the common electricity market, of course, it was us who developed all of that, and our governments, and maintaining, of course, the common travel area. And now, of course, UK officials seem to be reporting possible proposals on an all-island economic relationship to include customs, VAT, and on industry goods, and some remit for the European Court of Justice. But these, if you like, slight advances in the British position, while they're welcome, they still seem to be measures to facilitate trade between Northern Ireland and the EU rather than maintaining the frictionless trade which we want between all parts of our country and the European Union. It does seem that at long last the British Government may be inching towards a special economic zone for Northern Ireland, which will be both obviously in the jurisdiction terms inside the UK, but also in economic terms and in all important terms inside the European Union, just beside us. And as I said, there seems to be an emerging idea that a new withdrawal agreement, which could be achieved by the 31st of October, by Halloween, that it would go on till the end of 2022. But the worrying aspect of the current proposals, Cathaoirleach, of course, are that goods and services not covered by this emerging proposed all-island regime would still be subject to checks, even away from the border. And we know all the dangers that can have after the traumatic 30-year war that we endured in this country, and which damaged our economy and our people and ended in the deaths of so many people. And I think even EU officials are concluding that the task for both sides in securing the agreement, with just 6 weeks left, still remains daunting indeed, as the Taoiseach has said. Some Irish commentators, of course, like Mr Stephen Collins of the Irish Times, seem to believe that the backstop could be used, if you like, by the EU to be made an insuperable barrier to prevent the UK leaving the EU. Obviously, British public opinion is divided, and obviously Mr Collins and everybody gives respect to the achievements of the EU, especially in reconciling France and Germany, and helping so many European Union states to evolve into multi-party democracies. But our focus and the government's focus, it should be simply to continue to protect the all-island economy and the Good Friday Agreement, and prevent the recreation of a border in this country with the support of the other 26 EU states. And I believe now, the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach, they must, however, intensify their efforts along with our 26 allies, to secure a withdrawal deal before Halloween, which ensures that Ireland won't be pressurised, or we won't be pressurised in any way, to create a European Union frontier on the island of Ireland. In other words, that we are not going to be used conversely by the European Union to try to coerce the British people. Our colleague earlier, Deputy Durkan, of course, talked about the American Federation. Europe is not a federation. It remains a confederation, I suppose, with certain important economic links. And commentators, I think, like Mr. Collins and others, and Mr. Durkin here in the House tonight, they forget, I think, a lot of the Irish people remain opposed to the sort of United States of Europe concept, which has now been advocated by President Macron and his followers in the European Parliament, people like Mr. Verhofstadt. It's also striking, of course, in the vast economic area of services, that there is really hardly a single European market in any case. The Economist magazine, Minister, in its current edition, this week's edition, it reports, for example, on the single market in detail, and it shows like how financial services, banking, legal, medical services, many professional services, telecom services, how they generally remain nationally based in each of the 28 nations. For example, 85% of banking services in each member state are provided by national banks to local companies, and there's been little effort by successive EU commissioners to integrate professional services, which are still often dominated by local and national guild structures, like we have with the Law Society and also with King's Inns in this country in relation to our legal education and training. And of course, in Ireland, our constituents repeatedly ask why bank mortgage rates are so crushingly high, and why the mortgage rates of Germany and Holland and of their banks don't apply in Ireland. In other words, why isn't there a common market in relation to even mortgage finance? So in some ways, talking of protecting a single market in banking, it's largely a mirage. And it's also notable, as I said, that telecom broadband services are also nationally based often, and the countries like France, Germany, Spain and Italy, they encourage companies to have national champions, or they encourage their companies to be national champions in those and many other services and manufacturing fields. So in relation to the backstop, isn't it the case that so many services don't require extensive single market protection, because they've always taken place essentially in distinct national markets? So despite protestations, I think, from Brussels, it should be possible to reach agreement on maintaining an all-island market in Ireland in the areas where we do have a genuine common market. Of course, we've seen in the UK the division, and people were referring earlier to the 17, I think it was at 52-48% vote, and we have on the one hand the extreme Brexiteers and the Tory party, on the other hand the Liberal Party advocating opposite positions. But I think the proposals today, insofar as they would influence us, from Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the British Labour Party, in the Guardian newspaper, they seem very fair and reasonable. After a general election, which hopefully the Labour Party would win, Mr Corbyn, of course, proposes to negotiate a withdrawal agreement based on a new customs union with the European Union, a close single market, fairly close alignment, guarantees in relation to workers' rights, and guarantees in relation to the environment, because people are deeply concerned that this Singapore, freewheeling Singapore-type economy that Brexiteers and people like Mr Johnson, Mr Gove and Mr Rees-Mogg seem to want to happen. It will be an economy in which there will certainly be a total race to the bottom, in which workers and environmental rights will suffer greatly with impacts on us across the Irish Sea. So an agreement, I think, based on the kind of principles, the four principles Mr Corbyn has outlined, he intends, if he's in the position, to put it to the British people alongside an option to remain. But given the appalling record of the Tory and Liberal government since 2010, when they came in and imposed totally unnecessary austerity on the British people, which of course I would say the Fianna Fáil, Green and later on the Fine Gael Labour government did precisely the same thing, that we would there would be an opportunity for the British people under a Corbyn-led Labour government to come to a relationship with Europe, whether it's in or out, but which would also enable our own economy and our own country to function as to heretofore, and to obviously to develop in a very positive manner. Thanks, Cathaoirleach.